So, Senator, can you just talk about your involvement with the water discharges? Why come out to the South Florida Water Management District to kind of talk about?
Well, just to get an update now, if we get to a critical point in the process here in Washington, we were fortunate yesterday to get the committee to approve at the Senate level the Central Everglades Planning Project, and obviously, hopefully, we're hopeful of getting that passed out of the full Senate over to the House and ultimately into law. And there's a lot of work that remains to be done, but we feel optimistic about it. So just kind of getting an update on the existing projects that are in the pipeline to be able to go back and justify to my colleagues why we need more money and more approvals.
What do you feel has been the challenge in getting this underway?
Well, I mean, the challenges at the federal level are manifold. Number one, just the process takes forever. To go from A to Z in the federal level, it takes a long time. It's not as quick as it is in the state legislative level. That's been part of it. I think part of it is the notion that there is no silver bullet. There is no one single project that in and of itself solves all of our problems. And the third thing is we're trying to deal with multiple things at the same time. And you've got an ecological system in Lake Okeechobee that you want to maintain. You've got flood control issues that you have an obligation to deal with. And then you've got the endangered species that might be impacted by water flows in a particular area. Then you've seen what's happened in St. Lucie and in Caloosahatchee and in other places that have been complicated. And then, of course, you've got the Everglades restoration component to it as well. So these are a lot of moving pieces that all have to fit together. And then there's no single project that takes care of all of it. It has to all happen, and it builds upon one project will build upon another. So it's a complicated issue, and it's going to take more time, but we feel good about the progress. There's more work to be done.
Are there any things that can be done, though, Senator, in the short term? Is there anything that can be done, especially for Southwest Florida?
Well, I mean, as you see, the answer is there's no silver bullet. Like that's the point everybody says. Is there one thing we can do that changes everything? The answer is there's no one single thing we can do. We got to do a bunch of different things. It's the ability to store more water. It's the ability to treat that water before it's released. It's also localized issues. I mean, some of the issues we've seen with the water quality, both in St. Lucie and in Southwest Florida, have been driven by seepage that's occurring in the local communities from old septic tanks and things of this nature. So it's, I use the analogy in our meeting of a Rubik's Cube. You get one side of it right, but then the other sides are off balance. But so a lot of different things have to happen over a period of time, and we're making incremental progress. You know, the 10-mile project has been deauthorized and hopefully will be transferred here over the next 30 to 60 days. That will help increase capacity in the long term to store more water. But a lot of different things have to happen, and that's why we want to make sure all of that is moving along.
Senator, do you support BioLink south of the lake? There's a bill filed by Representative Clausen.
Not at this time. First of all, the money isn't there. You're not going to get it funded. Second of all, I don't want to distract from the projects that are currently underway. Third, you don't have a willing seller right now. But the biggest issue is we've got current projects that are already programmed, that are being executed upon, and I don't want us to lose focus on those programs and those projects and getting those done. I think we should be 100% focused on completing the projects that are in the pipeline, that have been designed, that are ready to move forward on. I don't want us to lose focus on that. And you know, some of these broader issues about buying, it's going to take a long time and a lot of money, and right now I just don't think it's a realistic proposal.
Have you talked to any of the constituents, business owners on the Treasure Coast about some of the concerns they may have about releases?
Of course, and one of the things that we've pushed the Small Business Administration and others to do is the disaster declaration, which has allowed funds to be opened up to deal with it. But again, I mean, it's one of the things that we can help is where we can store more water to prevent some of that flow from happening, especially when water capacities reach a certain point. Separate from that is the local issues that exist. You know, who's going to pay for these septic tanks to be taken out and replaced? I mean, these are localized county and city issues which is why this is such a complicated issue. There are multiple places in which this becomes complicated, but we've gotten extensive number of calls to our office from businesses that have been impacted, especially in the latest round of what you've seen there with the nutrients, and that's why we push so hard for the disaster declaration and for those funds to become available.
And within the last 2 weeks, they have, decreased discharges. Is that?
Yeah, sure, I mean, that's great, but the problem is, number one, a lot of what's being caused there is not just from the discharges from Lake Okeechobee. It's a contributor. But even if discharges stop completely, you're still going to have a problem because there is local contamination that has to be addressed in the long term. I think over time you'll see discharges go down even further as more of that water flow. First of all, as Lake Okeechobee increases its capacity to hold water, and second, as you find alternative places for that water to be held and treated. And obviously there's a dual impact here, is you want more clean water flow to kind of restore the natural flow of the Everglades and into Florida Bay. So I think that part of it hopefully continues to get better. But you're still going to have an issue in St. Lucie and Martin County and in other places until the local contributors to contamination are not addressed.
Senator, you mentioned alternative places for the water to be stored. Do you foresee in the future that maybe we need to buy more land to store that water?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, obviously that's up to the engineers and others who will tell us about capacity building. But I think what's important is to understand is a lot of those projects that have already been that are already in the pipeline have built into them the capacity to increase their capacity to store. They're all been dredged at lower levels, creating the capability for those projects in the future, if more water storage is needed, to be dredged even deeper so they can hold even more water. Again, I think we're looking at not just what's the most efficient use of taxpayer money, but also what can we get to the fastest. You know, the process from buying land to turning it into a place to hold water takes a long time. You've got current projects that are underway. We can't lose focus on those. And many of those storage areas have been built with the capacity, with the ability to increase capacity if needed in the future.
And you supported sugar price supports in the Farm Bill. I'm from the Treasure Coast. That's a highly controversial issue. Could you explain how do you reconcile your support for the sugar industry with stopping discharges?
I just want agriculture in general to be treated fairly. Right now, American agriculture is not in a competitive situation with Brazil, with other countries that heavily subsidize their industries. I've always said that as soon as those countries get rid of their supports, we should get rid of ours. If we have a free trade agreement with a country, I'm open to that. I just think American agriculture, once you lose agricultural capacity, you don't get it back. Once land is developed into housing or turned into a shopping mall, you can't flip it back to becoming a farm. You do need agricultural capacity in this country. And so I think my position on sugar is no different than my position on citrus or my position on any other agriculture. And that is America needs an agricultural industry that's healthy and can help feed our people.
Senator, can we get you to weigh in a little bit on what's going on at the national level? Just this week, Jeb Bush weighed in and says that he's still not getting behind Donald Trump. Do you have any reaction?
There's an ongoing Republican primary. Voters will be voting in Indiana on Tuesday and other states in the weeks to come. And either, Donald Trump will have 1,237 delegates or he doesn't. It's not that difficult to understand. If he has 1,237 delegates, by the rules of the Republican Party, he will be the nominee. And if he doesn't, then the convention can play out in multiple different ways. But I think right now you still have ongoing primaries, and voters are deciding that across the country. So we'll wait and see what happens.
Can you
What do you
discuss
think about
your
what's-
delegates and what you'd like to see happen to your 170 or so delegates?
Well, all I've said up to this point is that we've earned those delegates, and we intend to keep them bound at least through according to the rules, through the first round. In some cases, through a couple rounds. But that'll become irrelevant if Donald Trump gets to 1,237 delegates, which he can potentially do if he continues to win by the margins he won last Tuesday.
What do you think about the recent comments by Boehner calling Cruz, quote, Lucifer?
I don't have any comment on it, except I don't think Ted Cruz is Lucifer.
What can you say about what the GOP party has become, or at least the candidates, as far as the alliance they said they were going to form against Donald Trump, and then Cruz coming out saying...
Well, guys, people, when they run for office, they do what they think they need to do to win. And, I mean, this is not the first time we've had heady competitive primaries. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama campaigned across all 50 states. Hillary Clinton stayed into that race until the very end of that race. And then she became a Secretary of State 6 months later. So this will all play out just like it has in the past.
In any scenario, would Marco Rubio be on a ticket?
For what?
Is there any scenario where Marco Rubio would
No,
be
I
on a
don't think
ticket?
so. I don't think so.
Can we get you to comment about the Zika situation, Senator?
It's a big problem. I think we should move on it quickly. I don't understand why it hasn't been dealt with, the emergency that it represents. I think if you talk to all the medical experts, they tell you this is a disease that we don't fully yet understand. We don't know what its neurological impacts are. Just because a child is born without microencephaly doesn't mean that we don't know that they may not manifest some other problem down the road. People used to believe this was a first trimester threat. Now we're seeing that infection having an impact well into the second trimester. We know that it's been linked now definitively to Guillain-Barré, which is a debilitating disease. We know that it's spread through sexual transmission as well as through mosquitoes. Listen, you tell me that there's this dangerous disease and it's spread by mosquitoes. If you live in Florida, you know mosquitoes are a real problem here, and it's about to start. And I just think it's a matter of time before someone contracts Zika in the continental United States. It already has happened in Puerto Rico. It's just a matter of time before someone contracts Zika from a mosquito bite in the United States, in the continental United States. And when that happens, people are going to freak out. And that's why I think we need to get ahead of this and
How?
begin to,
How?
well, by funding things like, for example, alternative ways to deal with mosquito control. Some of these mosquito species, I've learned more about mosquitoes than I ever thought I'd know, but at least one of these two species of mosquitoes that spread Zika has become resistant to traditional pesticides. And that's why there's these projects out there through genetically modified mosquitoes that help cut down on the mosquito population. I think you need more public awareness. People need to be told that it's not just an irritant of having a mosquito bite. This is a year where you really need to protect yourself from mosquito bites. It's about ensuring that people are treating their pools, are not leaving large bodies of water uncovered. These mosquitoes are spreading in a cap full of water. So it's about awareness when you travel. It's about having a to test for Zika. Right now, the only way to get a Zika test is to go through the Department of Health.
Sure.
You can't go to a hospital or Quest Diagnostics and get it. So bringing online a commercially available plan. It's about investing in the basic research that will lead us to a vaccine. Researchers believe they can get to a vaccine fairly quickly if enough investment is made into it. So there's a lot of things that need to happen here. But we need to deal with this on the front end. It could develop into a crisis. If what's happening in Brazil, there's no reason why what's happening in Brazil or what's happening in Puerto Rico can't happen in Florida. There's no reason. And if it does, in months while this was growing as a problem.
En español, señor senador, una pregunta. Usted confirmó la señora Roberta Johnson como embajadora de México. ¿Por qué ahora?
Bueno, yo obviamente como el proceso funciona, a veces tiene que, para recibir el apoyo de algo que quiere, te tiene que tratar con otras personas. En el tema de Roberta Jacobson, yo tengo problemas con la manera en la cual ella funcionó en el Departamento de Estado, pero pude conseguir que se extendieran las sanciones contra los violadores de derechos humanos en Venezuela, y pudimos conseguir eso ayer, así que por eso aprobamos su nominación. He asked about the Jacobson confirmation in Mexico. I have problems with the way she's functioned at the Department of State, and so I held up her nomination. I agreed to move forward on her nomination in exchange for a 3-year extension of sanctions against human rights violators in Venezuela. So we're happy we were able to get that done yesterday.
We've got the
What'd you
first
think of the
cruise going to
Larry
Cuba
Council
this
draft
Sunday.
bill?
What are your kind of thoughts on that, this cruise going Sunday to Cuba? What are your thoughts on that? I know there's a lot of controversy with Cuban Americans. Talk a little bit about your feelings on that.
Well, I just tell everybody, when you go to Cuba and you spend money, you're putting it right into the hands of a repressive regime. It's not going to bring democracy and freedom to Cuba, which is my interest. My interest in Cuba is a political opening. I think a free people have a right to choose any economic model they want. I don't believe increased travel to Cuba will lead to freedom for the Cuban people, nor changes in the behavior of the Cuban government. That's already borne out in the year and 3 months since this deal with Cuba was signed.
What did you think of the Dolphins draft pick?
The best player on the board. Can't believe he fell that far. Well, I guess I can, given what was posted on Twitter the other day. But I wish that young man well. He's a very talented player. They couldn't pass him up.
What happened to your Lake Okeechobee bill, the one you were working on last time you came to this?
We're still working on it. The Senate process is excruciatingly slow. Everything moves. It's taken 5 years to finally get the chairman, who's a friend, to finally, for example, move forward on the Central Everglades Planning Project. We were grateful to be able to do that. So we'll continue to push forward on all these projects. As I said, they're all important. They all work in conjunction with one another to help deal with this issue.
Do you
Senator,
still
just
think it's a good
finally,
idea?
Last question.
Senator, just finally, the governor has said he urges everyone to get on board the Trump train. Are you on board?
As I said, I'm not endorsing anyone in the primary. I'm going to let it play out. Voters are going to be they're going to be weighing in on Tuesday in Indiana and in other states after that. And I think if you turn on the news, it's clear that performance over the last couple of weeks has improved significantly in the states, in New York and in other places. We'll see if that continues in Indiana. Ultimately, he'll either have the delegates or he doesn't. If he does, he'll be the nominee, and I suspect the party will unify around him. And if he doesn't, then we'll see what happens at the convention.
Hillary versus Donald Trump, who do you support?
Oh, I'm going to support the Republican nominee. I've been pretty clear about that. Thank you, guys.